Welcome to episode 742 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. It is still the El Clásico aftermath. It has been days after, but of course, you know how I am. I'm a thinker. I really like to get into the nitty gritty and the details. And there is another guy I know who also does that and ruminates probably longer than he should. And it's none other than your friend and mine in Domagoj Kostanchuk of Barca Football to help me continue to break down El Clásico, but I do find this time around, Domagoj, well, of course, welcome back to the show, but I also do find, as we kick this show off, that even a few days afterwards, this was such a match that wound up being a referendum on whether or not, and I asked this in the 5 headlines, is this merely something that we can kind of make individual match excuses for? I'm using air quotes for all the listeners. Or is this showing bigger signs of things that are cracked about Hansi Flick's system that tells you it may be a time to panic about things? So it's more of we're kind of discussing whether or not this is a big picture thing or whether there's a bunch of little things that we can just kind of throw off to the side and say that was just about Sevilla and Girona and injuries and blah, 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 blah. So again, welcome back to the show. And then there you go. There's point number 1.
Thank you, Dan. It's always good to be back. And yes, I do like to think about these things, and so do you. And I think this is a good time to do that because Barca fans are panicking a bit. I would say we are hitting that panic button really hard, but I don't think it's time to do that just yet. This was a game that did show some of the cracks that have been, kind of brewing in the background. I think that is true, but also if there was ever kind of a Clásico to be lost, I think this is a good one to lose. It's early in the season. It's kind of Clásicos rarely, if ever, define the whole season, or maybe the champion is not announced in the Clásico, I would say. So I think that's one way to look at it. So if there was ever a Clásico to be lost, this one I do want to reiterate that. But yes, to your point, we can kind of pick on some of the things that we have seen from Barca, consistently bad things. I would say that kind of, yes, they are a cause for concern, but at the same time, this will pick up as you mentioned, as players return from injury. And I'm sure that at that point, once that happens, Barca will have enough firepower to kind of challenge this Madrid, because even though they did beat us in the Clásico, they didn't look flawless while doing it. So I think there's a bit of both to answer your question, Dan.
Well, don't worry, I have to rib you a little bit because now that you are a married man, and I think this is the first time I officially get to say congratulations on the podcast. So now that you are a married man, I feel like things in the Barca universe are just, they're on the back burner. It's okay. And I don't feel like you're ever going to panic, which is real good. And, I was so, not to say not panicked about the second half. I think the second half of Barca was so much better than the first half that I kind of missed some talking points. So I was asked on the 5 headlines. This was one of those things that I missed that maybe even could have been one of the headlines. And I'm going to ask you before we get into the details and tactics and formations and let all of the regular, big drama people give a little rest. Because on today's show, I just want to also mention we're talking tactics up front at the talk. This is for the real stat heads and the nerds, whatever. And then we're going to talk about Lamine Yamal and talking and all that drama and yada, yada, yada. But before we do any of that, again, I have to make sure that I'm crossing my T's and dotting my I's about the one thing I missed. And that is late on in that match when it was 2-1. Yes, Jules Koundé had a big miss, and we'll probably get to that at some point here. But did Dani Carvajal foul Ronald Araujo late in the match? I think the reason why I didn't say anything about this is because I was fatigued from all the other VAR and all the other foul nonsense that I just kind of didn't want to do another one that wasn't called. But in hindsight, people did say that, yeah, each of those individual incidents you've got to bring up. So did Dani Carvajal foul Ronald Araujo late in that match, Domagoj?
You mean the shoulder bar that happened? It's a tricky one. First, when I was watching it, I was like, okay, it is kind of a body into body kind of thing. But looking back at it, it does seem a bit hard. It seems a bit strong, right? So is it enough to call a penalty off of that situation? I don't know. See, I'm not so good with referee calls because I'm at the stage where I don't know what the rules anymore. I just don't know them, right? They do change a lot, and referees sometimes they don't even know themselves. So I'm gonna say it is leaning towards yes being a foul. I'm gonna go with that, and I'm sure that Koulias will be happy to hear that. But again, I'm far from an expert here, so I could be wrong. In the moment, I'm gonna be honest. In the moment, I was like, yeah, probably not a penalty. But then the more I looked at it, and I saw some examples on Twitter as well, where the exact same situation was called in the past. So I would say that maybe it leans towards being a foul for me, Dan.
Yeah, the argument that's always made, and I hear both sides of this argument, that if it is the second minute of the game and that foul occurs at midfield, it is a penalty. It's not a penalty. It is a foul on Danny Carvajal 98 out of 100 times, right? If that happened in the 5th minute at midfield, but because it is El Clásico, because it was whatever it was, the 90, whatever it was, the 87th minute or 84th minute, whatever it was, because it's late on the El Clásico, because El Clásico is so tight, and because it is a bigger guy in Ronald Araujo getting taken down by a smaller guy in Danny Carvajal, I think the referee took all of that into account and did not call that PK. Because again, if you're calling it as a foul, 5th minute, midfield, absolutely 100% a foul. Guy just bowled him over. Foul. But again, for that to be the thing that then decides the result of El Clásico, but then again, the kind of argument is that, well, if it was a foul and that's the rule of the law, then you have to just call the foul the way you're supposed to call the foul. And if then that is the foul that decides El Clásico to be a draw, like it's not taking away from Real Madrid. It's that Real Madrid, they made a mistake, they committed a foul, and they deserve to be punished for it. And then, of course, all I had to say was Real Madrid not punished for a referee decision, and then here comes everybody. All right, so let's let's let them again ruminate and get frustrated in my comments and hit us up on social media. Instead, man, I'm going to do something here. I'm a little worried that Carlos Puyol, who unfortunately I missed. He was at the New York City Pena. He and Ed Sheeran came to visit, which is really cool to know that I guess he was a few blocks from me. But anyway, I didn't get down to it. I do the watch logs on Big Up again that I really enjoy people sitting with me and on that. But I'm a little worried that Carlos Puyol might still be in New York City, because if I say what I'm about to say, I'm worried I'm about to get a knock on my door, and then Capita is going to have a word with me, because I want to give credit to Xabi Alonso, and here's why I'm going to do it. Because Real Madrid won this match more, I think, than Barca even lost it, and I'll explain why. Real Madrid, I think, won that match and shut down Barcelona when Real Madrid did not have possession, out of possession. A lot of people, and we will talk about Barcelona in possession as one of the issues and how to fix that. And I think when people think about how to win a game, they think about creating big chances by having the ball. Obviously, you can't score a goal if you don't have the ball. So any criticism of a team starts there fundamentally. But I think that Real Madrid, to Xabi Alonso's credit, won this game without the ball. They were in their 4-4-2 high press, the way that I think Hansi Flick completely understood that they were going to be in. It was Mbappe man-marking Eric Garcia. It was Goulet, usually man-marking Pau Barci. And then Tchouaméni was man-marking Pedri, and Bellingham on Pedri and Tchouaméni on De Jong. More often than not, that was the permutation. Camavinga was then pressing high against Balde, and Vinny Jr. was pressing Koundé, which forced Chesney into long balls that Madrid was winning with Torres up top instead of Lewandowski. I mentioned all on the 5 headlines that man marking has been an issue against Sevilla, against Girona, against PSG. Yep. We're seeing that. And for Barcelona to break through that, they have to take risks to get through the press. And the only counters that Barcelona could get is if Fermin got free from Dean Hewson, who would step up, and so that he would get stuck upfield, meant there was space in behind, and then again, he caught upfield. That's what happened when Fermin Lopez had that 3v2 in the second half that he shot instead of passing, which he probably should. Again, Barcelona 3-on-2. Or it was Torres against Militao, which Torres did not win, which is a credit to the double ACL man in Militao. He was fantastic, arguably the man of the match. And Ferran Torres did not look fit and isn't Lewandowski. Those things are both true. Now, Barcelona did break through that sometimes. They did break through that press because, again, once they broke through, then it was a really good chance. Not a big chance necessarily, but a good chance. But unfortunately, they didn't finish. And as the game wore on, Madrid were fine with dropping Goulet deeper to man-mark De Jong. Bellingham stayed on Pedri, and Tchouaméni then headed into a back 5 because Fermin was also trying to push forward. So with Barcelona trying to change that high line of confrontation, not the high line, but I'm saying the pressure up top, and then putting 5 up top as we usually see. The best version of that is with Gavi. I'm again trying to give you the little breadcrumbs as I make this case. The key for Barcelona too was also that Carreras needed to handle whatever Lamine Yamal had against him when in space, and he did that well. So I think that is, again, Barcelona when they were in possession, and it was Real Madrid out of possession. That is a credit to Xabi Alonso that he game planned for Barcelona to struggle in exactly the places that they struggled as expected.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Dan, especially because Xabi Alonso is that kind of a coach. Even before joining Madrid, he used to do that. So he would have his attackers do the work. So he had Mbappe and Vinicius do the job, and then once the job was done, he took them off, and then Madrid were just defending for the rest of the game, right? To close out the game, rather. And I think that's what he had done at Bayer Leverkusen as well before joining Madrid. So I think from that point of view, yes, he knew what had to be done, and I did like that mid block. To your point, yes, a 4-4-2 or a 4-1-4-1, whatever you want to call it. It did really well to shut down exactly the areas that Barca had to exploit, and there were some sequences to your point as well where Barca had managed to kind of break through that. The ball would go to Balde, and Balde was kind of the pressing trigger at times, which was, Balde can usually wiggle out of a pressure, but then he was being pressed really high and really quickly by Bellingham, and he had to go back into the back line, and the back line would circulate the ball, and kind of when it reached Koundé on the other side, that's when he would look for a diagonal ball into Fermin Lopez, right? And Fermin would then lay the ball off to Lamine Yamal, and by that time, hopefully, Ferran Torres would be making a run beyond Militao and getting the ball, but Barca couldn't really, recreate that reliably enough. And I think the thing with Madrid is also the high press. It's kind of the surprise of this Madrid team, because they never used to be like that under Ancelotti, but now they are kind of a high pressing team as well, and they're not really afraid to have this back line isolated against your forwards. And I think that especially against Barcelona, that worked, because there was, to your point again, Ferran Torres couldn't really handle Militao. We couldn't really create anything out of that 3 versus 3 in the back. Let's put it that way. And they're very comfortable winning those duels in particular. So if they do force you long, they're okay with that, because they have this confidence that they will be able to win those individual duels. And if you do kind of bounce the ball off into the midfield, they do have Tchouaméni and Camavinga and Bellingham that to scoop up those second balls and kind of win possession there and then hit you on the counter immediately. So I think from that perspective, they had a very good plan. And initially, before the game, I was like, okay, Barca need to be very calm. They need to be able to outplay Madrid in the high press, because if they do go long, Madrid will just win those duels and we won't be able to get anywhere. But it turns out that some verticality was needed in that game, because there were chances for, I don't know, Rashford or Lamine or even Ferran Torres to run into space and maybe latch onto some of the longer balls. But ultimately, there was something lacking in that backline as well. And I think many people have said this as well. The lack of intent, or maybe the lack of courage, if you will, sometimes just to take a chance, take a gamble, because we were trying to play it safe, I think, and that is one part of the reason why we were not effective in possession. But also, again, to your point, that I think Madrid's mid block or mid to high block was really, really good, and they were reading the pressing triggers really well. And when you do press like that with intent, and that has to be said as well, because they do have Vinny and Mbappe, and you would think, okay, these guys don't press and can't press. Usually, yes, that is the case, but they do really good pressure in the opening, like 5 to 10 seconds of a pressing sequence. They are really good. They do drift off sometimes. They kind of get disconnected, but in those first 5 to 10 seconds, they are really good in the pressure. And Madrid were really good at getting the job done, or at least forcing Barca into uncomfortable situations within those first 5 to 10 seconds of high pressure. So I think all in all, yes, a very good tactic by Xabi Alonso to kind of knowing what to target and how to do it, and then exploiting the physicality or the lack of dueling on Barca's side to kind of, there was no way for Barca to go out of the press by ball playing, because the ball playing was missing. And then if you do go long, you are missing the firepower or the muscle even, or the profiles to exploit that way of attacking as well. So it was a win-win for Madrid in either of those situations, I think.
Yeah, where I want to, in the improv version of this, I want to and add to what you mentioned about Barcelona not being risk adverse, because it's so interesting when we think of this Hansi Flick team, and then the Xavi team before that Hansi Flick is it's what we're thinking about in modern football, and the managers that we think that build up slowly and build up through possession, right? Hansi Flick and Pep Guardiola. It's so interesting because when you look at, or Mikel Arteta at Arsenal as well, teams that we think, okay, they're the ones that are going to take the ball, slowly wear you down and beat you with the ball. The interesting thing is that in the Europe top 5 leagues, I just mentioned 3 of the top 4 highest lines defensively on the field, right? So while you do have the ball, having the ball actually means that you need to take some risks, because if you don't, the high line that you are playing is risky. Inherently, having the ball means that it's going to be risky unless you're taking those risks. And I think that was the dichotomy that Barcelona could not parcel out, because Barca in Real Madrid's half of the field were very risk adverse, especially in that first half, which is why it was so ugly. They didn't want to lose the ball on those long diagonals and switches, which are essential in this Hansi Flick system to get Lamine Yamal in 1v1 situations against whoever the left back is. Because you're right, to that point too, Real Madrid are doing such a good job through Camavinga, through Bellingham, which are big dudes, which are big, strong players who, and Tchouaméni as well, who are good in vertical space. They're big athletes, and they're tall, and they're long, and they're good dealing with vertical space. And so the switches have to come out if you're going to overload that left side. Now, in the previous two games, Barcelona built up a lot through that left side because, again, the athletes were not the same on the other side of looking across from you. So because the left side wasn't an option, you even attempted to build up to the left side. So that meant Eric Garcia, playing the left center back, had to get that diagonal on. De Jong has got to get that diagonal off to Lamine Yamal. And it just didn't come. And it's interesting because on the other side of it, that conservatism hurting Barcelona, that Alonso was the one that took those risks in Barca's half and trusted, to your point, that Militao and Tchouaméni were going to win the ball if it came out, which they did over and over and over again. And then from the second half, to the point you made about those runs in behind, Rashford, I thought, was fine in the game, but he didn't do enough to enhance his teammates. And I think that so far in this system with Hansi Flick has kind of been the issue with Rashford. If I were to say there's been a major issue for me, it's that his timing has kind of been off with those runs in behind. A lot of his success has come when it's him in space, getting the balls to feet. Even the assist in this game, like, he shows his quality. The assist to Fermin Lopez, wonderful. The cutback, Fermin Lopez, really tidy, clean finish. So Rashford has 5 goals, 5 assists this season, 10 goal total production already by the end of October. That is awesome, right? I said if you got 25 out of Rashford this year, it would be a success. You consider buying him, right? But then you saw here, when you're at the highest level, some of the limitations, and these are all fixable things for Rashford, which unfortunately for some of the other guys we're going to talk about may not be fixable because that's just not the profile that they are. But Rashford needs to continue to work on that timing with his teammates, because in that second half, there was a moment when I look and it's Pedri making the run into the half space. And so I'm looking at Barcelona's field and I'm like, if this pass does not get off to Pedri and this is under hit, Barcelona are in a world of hurt. This is going to end terribly because Pedri is now up in the half space and Rashford is tucked inside and isn't prepared to defend that counter if it gets off, if that passes is too under hit. And I believe at that juncture, it either was recoiled back to the center, I think, to Casado, or it was hit to Pedri, but in his direction towards the sideline. So whatever it was, it didn't wind up being a bad thing. But yeah, all of those things, I think, being so risk adverse in the opponent's half of the field. And then I think this transitioned us perfectly into saying that Lamine Yamal wasn't himself. And I have some of the stats to back this up. So I'm going to throw these numbers at you, and then I kind of want to make you make some sense of it. But actually, before we do that, before I bore people, I've been talking too long. The question I want to ask you first, before I talk about all the numbers, is about the drama part of it. Lamine Yamal was talking beforehand. He went on an interview with the biggest Spanish streamer in Iba, who was a big Real Madrid fan, and a lot was made after the final whistle, the brawl. Then he called the Hall, Militao, everybody getting up in his face. Of course, Vinny Jr. had so much to say throughout that match, obviously, as he always does. Whether or not Lamine Yamal should be talking or not. An 18-year-old kid seems to be talking a lot. He's publicly dating someone in their mid-20s at this point. So the whole cult of personality around Lamine Yamal, does it make you uncomfortable, Domagoy? Or do you say, Lamine Yamal, hey, you were the guy 4 times last season. Keep on talking.
It's tough to say. Although for a Clásico, okay, so 2 situations, so 2 scenarios. Just a general scenario and then a Clásico scenario. Because yes, I don't think Lamine has done, obviously he's a generational footballer that can be the next, whatever you want to call him, the next guy for Barca. He absolutely can be that. nothing's guaranteed, obviously. And I think barring any kind of injuries and mentality issues aside, he has what it takes to be whatever he wants to be, right, in the future. I think that is true. But it's also true that he hasn't really accomplished much yet, right? He's 18 and he has the world at his feet, as absolutely does, but he's not there yet, right? So he doesn't have any accolades. He doesn't have much in terms of achievements in his career to be acting that way. I think there is some truth in that. However, for El Clásico, I just think that you can't be, and I tweeted this, I think it was yesterday, you can't be too nice with Real Madrid. Real Madrid don't do nice. If you're too nice and all, touchy-feely and respect and all that with Real Madrid, they will eat you up. Right? They will eat you up, chew you up, and they will spit you out in a second, right? So I think you need this for El Clásico. I think you need this kind of, I don't know, just not, I don't want to say hostility, but you need to show some guts, right? Some balls. I think you need that for a Clásico. So from that perspective, I also feel like Barca didn't have enough of those soldiers, quote unquote, for the Clásico, because we were just too nice with them. Pedri and Frenkie de Jong, for example, look at that midfield, ability through the roof, but there's very little in terms of just attitude, right? Just get in your face, and I know De Jong does a lot as a captain. He does. I think he's doing a good job as a captain as well. Speaking to the media, speaking to the players, speaking to the referees. I think he's doing well, but I also think he's a bit too nice. And Pedri is obviously a genuinely nice bloke, but he gets picked on, despite that. And I think for the Clásico, you need some of that bite. And I think Lamine is doing those things that need to be done before a big game. Obviously, sometimes it will bite you on the ass, which, that happened to Lamine just now. But I think, generally speaking, and especially for big games, Lamine can talk the talk and walk the walk. He has done so so far, last season at least. Now, was he fit for this game? Fully fit? I don't think so. No, he's different. Something is a bit off. But I wouldn't discourage him too much. Obviously, the club should somehow, I don't want to say control him, but, just guide him through this process. We could go back to Lionel Messi, how he was protected, quote unquote, from bad influences from within and from outside. Maybe some of that needs to be translated to Lamine Yamal as well. But then again, today's children or kids, teenagers, whatever you want to call them, are different than 20 years ago, obviously, and they don't like to be told what to do. That's also there, obviously. But I think if you take away the ego part of Lamine Yamal, you take away a big part of who he is as a player. And all the big players, all the big superstars, Messi included in this, they have ego, right? They have that. They have that way of thinking where, okay, I can and will destroy you. And I think Lamine has that. And if you take that away from him, if you rein him in too much, I think he just becomes, half the player that he can be. So I wouldn't, while yes, the club should protect him, I wouldn't do it to an extreme, because then in that case, you just lose too much of what Lamine is. That's kind of my take on it, Dan.
I say talk to talk. I think that his dad is so involved, and his dad takes up a lot of oxygen in that room, and that's totally fine. Like, when you're right, when it comes to the big players like that, if there are adults in the room that are just taking up the oxygen, and that kid looked like he's just having fun, like, social media has always been a part of his, we'll say, not even brand, but he's always been silly on social media. Between him and Hector Fort and a lot of the players in that generation, like, they're constantly trolling each other all day. Like, they're constantly on each other on social media and just having fun. And I think to that point, I don't want them to lose their joy, and I wouldn't want Lamine Yamal to lose his joy. To that point, I think he plays with joy, he plays with excitement, and he plays to the moment. And he's done it for Spain against France. He's done it in 4 El Clásicos last season. So to me, yes, Lamine Yamal, keep talking your talk. And I think any idea that he's like, the club is letting him go off on his own, whatever. Like, no, every minute of the kid's life is under a microscope now from here until eternity. And to your point about being a generational talent, the way I talk about Lamine Yamal and his talent, I don't compare him to players of the past, because he's different in the way that Lamine Yamal, I mean, yes, it's very comparable to Neymar, not off the field, I'm saying on the field. But again, he's all in an entirely different part of the field. He's a right winger instead of a left winger. So even fundamentally, things are different, even though that's a very similar way that the eye test works for him. But yes, Lamine Yamal, I'm going to say keep talking your talk, because not say he has a built-in excuse. Like he's getting the hate that he's earned, but also it isn't. He is the conduit, as you mentioned, for that vitriol. Because even in victory, Real Madrid couldn't do it gracefully this time. Which I think that I'm not saying that Real Madrid do that every time. I think they're in the past, like when they were led by Luka Modric and when they were led by Tony Kroos, they did win gracefully. Like I remember in particular, it was a 3-1, maybe 2018. Luka Modric scored the winner or the eventual winner. And yeah, they were just fine. They were complimentary. Like Barcelona were just worse. And it didn't feel like it was, it didn't, not say it didn't feel like a Clásico, but it just didn't have that same heat. And I'm totally fine with the way that everything else was trying to grab people's attention, that there's a little bit of fun. There's a little bit of rivalry. Like let it happen. And the fact that they're brawling after the fact, like, Rafinha wasn't even, not even match fit and almost got himself re-injured by getting in that scrum at the end. And speaking of injured, that's, I think, the second question with Lamine Yamal. Again, before I talk about the tactics here, he is suffering from pubalgia, which is an issue with the groin area. That's sum that up. There is concern around the club about his injury, and it's one that Messi dealt with during the Tata Martino era. So way back in the day, it's like, and it doesn't really, sometimes it gets better, but a lot of times you're just kind of dealing with it. I've mentioned before, maybe I have never mentioned this before, but the worst injury I've ever had in my sports career is I tore my groin. It was like a year of rehab. It was terrible. I had to walk with a cane for a while. Like it was really terrible. And I couldn't imagine being out for like 5 weeks and then immediately trying to play in El Clasico. Like it's insane that he's even on the field. And there's a reason why the club is concerned about the injury, because it's not one that really heals with any kind of, you can't say 3 to 5 weeks. It just gets better. Right. And then sometimes it doesn't. And like Messi even said a few days ago when he was asked about it, that he's like, yeah, I still deal with it. I still deal with it at this age. And it was something that happened, 15 years ago at this point, or 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And he got it even earlier in his career as well. So you don't really get better from it, but you can recover to a point, right? Like it's strained at the moment, you can get better. But doctors said that his ability to move and shoot could be affected by almost 50% for the match. And you could tell the shots were way over. He couldn't keep he just couldn't keep everything tight the way you need to. Like you put tension on those muscles when you're going to shoot low and hard. And there was an inability to do that. Same thing, whenever anybody tried to play him in behind, he just didn't have that same speed and that same acceleration and burst that he usually does. So I guess the next question is, should Barcelona bite the bullet at this moment with him? And again, it's not an injury that there's any guarantee will heal, but should they bite the bullet and hope that he recovers? Give him a little bit of time off here and hope that he recovers. Is that something you would do?
I think I would. I don't see much point in pushing him to play consistently, and especially playing these high intensity games. Every Hansi Flick game is supposed to be high intensity, but we're seeing that that's not the case for our forwards, especially who have been struggling with that high pressure off the ball, especially. I don't see the point. I'm not sure if he can just play it off, if that makes sense. Would he just get used to it by playing more? I don't think that would that happen. I'm not that familiar with the injury itself, but I don't really see the point of playing an unfit player. But then to your point, if that never heals, then at what point do we say, okay, you've had enough of rest, just go and do what you can? But I think if we just, yes, I would kind of try and give him a bit of time and see if it gets better, if he maybe gets used to it, if can he do something to mitigate it a little bit, or maybe just ease the pain or whatever he's feeling, because at the moment you can clearly see, okay, this is Lamine. He's kind of trying to do what he normally does, and to be fair to both Lamine and other opponents that we've faced recently, they've done a good job at kind of minimizing the damage that he can do, even if he was fully fit. There were kind of plans in place to prevent him having the influence that he usually has. So I think that's also played a part. But then when he does get into situations where he can do damage, to your point, the shots look off, the dribbles are kind of slower, maybe a little bit, and these things accumulate. It's kind of a cycle where you also lose confidence, and then that confidence kind of impacts the way that you play. So I would say that maybe try and see if rest does him any good. I mean, from what you've just said, it might not be the answer, but I don't see any real benefit in trying to push him to play as much as he has been playing if he's not well, if he's unfit at this point.
Yeah, I also mentioned too that this is a World Cup year. So there is a big tournament
Oh.
that all these players are looking at. And when we talk about generational and career defining, even though he'll be 19 years old, right? During the, well, no,
Mhm.
July something, July 19th or something is his birthday. So he is turning 19 after the World
Mhm.
Cup final. So, he's an 18-year-old kid for the World Cup this summer. And you never know. You never know. So it could be a career defining summer for him. So he obviously wants to be healthy for that. I will also say about the narrative here that it was 2-1 in El Clasico. If Jules Koundé finishes that chance late, the one
Mhm.
that was set up by Lamine Yamal, the narrative completely changes because he had statistically one of his worst games. And his game was so bad. The numbers I'm about to give you, Domagoy, were so bad that I can say he was unfit. And it's like his teammates, if anything, I'd say, hey, he was trying his best. He wasn't fit. And his teammates admitted that. And so I'm not making an excuse for him, but I am because this is an excuse of an injury that meant that his performance suffered. At the end of 90 minutes, his 79.2% pass completion was the worst for any of the players that played in that game. He lost possession 20 separate times, and that was the worst of any player on either side. He had just one touch in Madrid's box. Just one touch in Madrid's box. That is not the case usually. Even against PSG, he had 3 touches in PSG's box in the first 15 minutes of that match. So this was a Lamine Yamal that was not fit, was not okay, and those numbers back that up. And I do, with all my heart, give him the out, give him the excuse and say he was not fit and he tried his
Mhm.
best. Because even his teammates could feel that, though. I want to give credit to Albert Blaya Sensat, who does a wonderful job for Spanish content. Again, if you do speak Spanish, I throw you in his direction. He viewed the match a second time, and there were moments in the match when a ball to Lamine Yamal that was not played changes everything. And I don't know if his teammates knew that he wasn't fit or there was just a hesitation, or again, I go back to that the idea of risk aversion. There were some diagonals, as I said, that De Jong, Pedri, and Rashford all had a chance to play, but they just forced it through the middle, lost the ball, and especially Pedri. There were times when his teammates tried to play him into space, but physically he needed the ball to feet. And so for Lamine Yamal, a number of times, again, even Pedri, that's why there are criticisms coming out from Pedri that you usually don't see. They say that Pedri
Mhm.
kind of just didn't look himself either. He looked like he's been playing way too much football, and it goes back to the idea. And now I think we're transitioning here into solutions as Hansi
Mhm.
Flick kind of goes through this. Lamine Yamal missed 4 matches. Balde had missed 4 matches. 5 matches. Lamine Yamal and Balde. Fermin had missed 4 matches, and Pedri clearly has been playing way, way, way too much football. Balde, as I said, missed Sevilla and PSG, which were 2 of the worst results of Barca seasons as well. Even though they lost by 1 to PSG, they lost El Clásico by 1. Rafinha, Gabi, Lewandowski, Juan Garcia, Olmo, Christensen, and Inigo Martinez was sold. That is the difference between El Clásico this season and El Clásico last season. All the names that I just mentioned, except for Juan Garcia, of course, but in theory, that is an upgrade that is unavailable for this match. So
Mhm.
as much as we are going to try our best, Omagoy, to galaxy brain how Xabi Alonso is the mastermind behind the downfall of Hansi Flick and how Hansi Flick's ideas at Barcelona have already met their end. If Barcelona gets healthy, the press we talk about with Rafinha cannot be understated. Even in the second half, when I talked about how Barcelona were playing with 5 along that front line and pressuring
Mhm.
Real Madrid, do you know who does that better than everybody else in that little half space there from the left? Gabi. Gabi does. We talked about Lewandowski being able to hold the ball up in a way that Ferran Torres doesn't. That's Lewandowski missing. Joan Garcia, so much better than Tech. Now, Tech, yeah, he obviously saved a PK. The first time the Barca keeper has saved a PK in
Mhm.
2023, I know is the year answer, but I think it might have been the first half of 2023. So it had been over 2.5 years since any Barcelona keeper had saved a PK. I thought he made the saves that he could, and he had to. So Tech played really well, but again, Barcelona with the ball. So that was without the ball, but with the ball, that was some of the issues as well because Juan Garcia was not there to deliver the better pass than we know that Szczesny was playing that just wasn't coming off. And that's another one too. Now, Fermin for Dani Olmo, I don't think Dani Olmo would have necessarily improved this match too much more than the way that Fermin did. Fermin scored the goal, is really important on the press and all those things. And then we'll talk about the back line because, again, injuries is a huge part of this. Getting healthy is solution one. But I think if there's one thing I go take away from this match is that personnel along that back line who is picked for which matches and how that is all rotated, that's really what I think maybe Hansi Flick needs to think about and tinker here. Do you agree with that sentiment? And if so, what would you do?
I do agree with that. I think some of these players are situational players, and that makes them rotational players, if you want to call them that. So I think Araujo, obviously, I think we're kind of building up towards discussing Araujo here. And I think, yes, there are games where Araujo is needed, and there are games where Araujo is less needed. And I think this might have been one of those games, because if you have a formula that kind of works and you have this player who, obviously at his best was able to deal with Madrid and deal with Vinicius and these players that they have, then there would be an argument of actually playing him there. But we also know that Flick is the priorities that he has in that back line have always lied in ball playing. I think that's always what he has prioritized in the past, at least, or last season and moving to this season. It's always been that on the ball ability. That's why Eric does get a nod ahead of Araujo, even though Flick knows that he'll be facing Mbappe and Vinicius, especially in those open spaces and vertical channels they mentioned as well. So I think, yes, we can talk about situational picks. Now, when it comes to that back line, yes, obviously Kubarsi has to play, Balde has to play. Now Koundé, I don't know about Koundé, right? So if you don't play Koundé and play Eric on the right, then that means that potentially Araujo comes in at the center back, and then you have Balde, Kubarsi, Araujo, and Eric. And I think in that situation, obviously there's the fear of Eric versus Vinicius on the right. But then again, Koundé versus Vinicius did not look good for us at all, right? So I think that there isn't a big enough downgrade there to justify not having Araujo in the lineup. And obviously, it's very easy to be to be in our position right now and say, okay, this is what should have been done after the fact that we lost the Clásico. But it did seem to me, at least looking from outside in, it did seem to me that Araujo was going to play, and I think everyone was kind of in agreement. Okay, Araujo should play this game, and then yes, maybe that is the case. And I think Flick had this. He saw that Madrid are kind of trying to be a bit more aggressive off the ball. They're trying to be a bit more of a high pressing side. Maybe he had that fear. Okay, we have Tech in the back line, who's not the greatest in possession, as you said. He's not Joan Garcia. So if I have Tech and Araujo, what happens when Madrid press us? And they will press us because under Xabi Alonso, they are a high pressing side, not for the whole 90 minutes, perhaps, as we saw in the Clásico as well. But I think he had that idea that, okay, I can't play both of them at the same time, because we saw against Sevilla. When was it? I think it was Sevilla. The Barca, they don't have the right personnel in the back line. They just can't beat those high pressing sides who man mark you. And Madrid did a good job of doing that. So I think that was kind of at the back of his head. And having Kubarsi as the left center back, I know it has some. There are some good stuff about Kubarsi on the left, but obviously, I think his ball playing is still better, obviously, from the right side of the pitch. So you do lose a bit of Kubarsi in that setup as well. And then if you have Tech and Araujo, is that too much of a disability in possession for him to say, okay, we can actually play through the Madrid high press? Because even without Araujo on the pitch, with the quote unquote better ball players in play, we still kind of had issues with that. And Madrid were able to force us into these situations where we had to hoof the ball long, or maybe just clear the ball and hope that we can win duels, which we couldn't do. So I think from that perspective, does putting Araujo in, does that make the situation a lot more worse in position for us? That's kind of the direction I'm trying to go to, Dan, just now.
Yeah, I hate that we agree too much, but I agree wholeheartedly. Like it's a lot of those words are the ones that you took right out of my mouth. In my prediction, I had Araujo and Eric Garcia, with Eric Garcia playing as right back, because I did think that it was kind of time for Koundé, who looks completely gassed. Like he and Pedri look completely gassed. Koundé is not sharp, and that's, I mean, the top level football. That's what it is. Like it's cutthroat as it is. Like you want Koundé to be able to play through that and get to the other side of it, but maybe he does need a rest until he can get through to the other side of it. He just plays way too much football, and he's relied on too much. And I'd say that now you're going to rely on Eric Garcia a lot more than him. But my issue with Eric playing at center back there against Real Madrid was that and I know that people think that Eric is a worry in the vertical space, but that's not actually the case. When teams beat you in behind, it's not that you've lost the vertical battle, but you've lost that offside trap battle, which is in the horizontal space. And so Eric and Kubarsi kept getting separated with way too much space in between them horizontally. Because if they're closer, then Mbappe does not have that room to run into. And on that first goal that Bellingham played, yes, it was a really good ball from Bellingham. He broke through two different lines, the midfield line and the back line. But it allowed Mbappe to run onto a ball off the shoulder of Kubarsi and in behind Eric Garcia, because there was, again, too much space in between them. They were too separated. And then Balde had kept Mbappe on. So it was all three of those defenders, even though I'm saying Koundé is the one that needs to be replaced. It was over the course of 90 minutes that Koundé is. That's why I say that. But the issue with the other three was, again, that space in between the two center backs and then Balde keeping Mbappe on side. Again, that is goal number one. Goal number two was just a comedy of errors. Like, there was just size and all those things. I don't need to rehash what happened there. That was Koundé just getting completely destroyed by Vinny Jr. Vinny Jr. getting where he wanted, Barcelona getting defensively all out of sorts, and then Balde losing the 50-50 on the back post, and then Mbappe is there. And there you go. There's a goal. There's a 2-1. To that point about Tech and Araujo, again, I completely agree with that, because that was my thinking too, that we saw what happened against Sevilla. Against Real Madrid, it could have been worse. So you do mitigate the risk by, I know it sounds so silly, but you actually mitigate the risk defensively, by putting Eric and Kubarsi on, because in theory, that back line is only going to bleed so much because of the ball possession they have and how press resistant they are. And Sevilla did well to score a lot of goals very quickly because they were able to conquer Barcelona on the press. Now, whether or not you start Araujo, I think that ideally in the spring, and again, a lot changes, but if next El Clásico, when we'll say hopefully Barcelona are in the final of Supercopa, is that hopefully or not? I mean, they get some money out of it, so yeah, hopefully. So if they're hopefully in the final of the Supercopa, I would hope that Joan Garcia is healthy, and it's Joan Garcia, Araujo, and Eric Garcia, because I think we saw the best version of Barcelona so far this season with that trio together, because again, Joan Garcia and Eric Garcia make up so much for what Ronald Araujo can't do in press resistance situations. Because again, what else is happening here? That permutations is not all working when Barcelona have the ball. Because here is the worrying stat of Barcelona against the presses right now. They are 17th in the Liga this season. 17th in big chances conceded with 21. They've conceded 21 big chances. They're 17th out of 20 in the Liga. Only Rayo, Sevilla, and Girona have been worse. Athletic Club and there is no way, Domagoj, that you guess the other one, who has only 12 allowed this season. And there's two teams with 14 too. Let's play a little guessing game here. Yeah, so there's two teams have 12. It's not Real Madrid. I'll say they're like 10th or whatever. So it's not Real Madrid. And so I'll say if you give me either 1 and 2 who have 12 or 3 and 4 who have 14, if you give me like half of those teams, I'll compliment you.
Oh, wow. So teams who have conceded the least
big chances,
the fewest. So who's won? Atletico Madrid won.
Yeah. Atletico Madrid is third. Yep, with 14, or tied for third with 14. Yep.
Right.
Technically fifth. Fourth. Yeah.
Athletic Club
is number 1. Tied with 12. Yes. So, all right. So you did it. You got Athletic Club with 12 with Alaves. I know. Alaves. And number 14, has 14 big chances conceded. So tied for third is Elche, who Barcelona play. Yeah, exactly. So Barcelona play against a team who are third in the Liga in big chances conceded without Pedri this season, who is helping them create a lot of their big chances. So what I'm telling people for the weekend is that this match might be disgusting. It really might be really disgusting. I'm warning everybody about that now. It might be really, really gross. And then the other big thing that's brought up here is that Ferran Torres has looked pretty good starting as a starter, with Lewandowski being the backup and coming in for him. But he is not the answer, Lewandowski, long term. We know that this is his last season at Barcelona. Like, already the buzzards are. I saw a report this week that Messi had said, no, this is not true, but that Messi had considered saying, hey, Luis Suarez, I know you're probably going to retire. You know, and if anyone who watches it in Miami knows that Messi is not ready to retire, but Luis Suarez might be, and joining Busquets and Alba. It's about time. If anything, I thought Alba, in order, I thought of retirement. I thought, yes, it was Busquets' time to retire, then Luis Suarez, then Alba, then Messi. So with Alba gone, I don't know. But anyway, with potentially Inter Miami now looking towards Lewandowski and bringing in a player that never played with Messi, but obviously at that kind of level, we know that that's it for him. So we can worry about that problem later. But for this season alone, it still might be time for Lewandowski to start those big matches. And it is that give and take and that push and pull of what he doesn't do for you with his mobility, but what we're seeing Barcelona need to do against teams that are now pressing them. Their teams are pressing Barca this season in a way that they aren't or weren't last season. That I think is the biggest thing on how teams approach Barca. They're not just sitting low block. They're not just sitting about mid blocks. They're not respecting them. In the same way that I'm watching with the NBA, this is like the second week, this 94 feet of pressure, the better your opponent, if you don't respect them, and I don't know, I deal with this in my own athletic life as well. Like last week, my team got destroyed in Fall League twice. We got blown out by like 20 on both times. And you know what? When I was sitting in the car, and obviously I ruminate a little too much, as people know, I'll keep using that word. I'm a thinker. So I'm just like, what did I do wrong? I felt like I played okay. I had like one turnover on the day. It was whatever. And it was that we played teams that I knew those players usually play at a higher level in the club scene than me. And they're good players. Like some of them are really good players, former pro players. So I knew that they're good. And I think I gave them too much credit. And that is what I know I did. And I think teams this season, again, around the NBA and with Barcelona, and you deal with it, when you play the Giants, you see in the Copa del Rey, which is now getting fun and exciting, do not respect them. And that's what's happening to Barcelona. And so I think you do need a player like Lewandowski who, it doesn't matter whether he's battling in the third tier, it doesn't matter if he's battling in the first tier. If you're a center back and you're kicking him, he's going to push you and fight you and claw you. And he's going to make it a fight. And it seems like that's what Barcelona need up top right now. They need somebody who's going to fight and say, hey, you're not afraid of me. I don't care. I still want to crush you like a grape. That is what I want to do. I am Robert Lewandowski.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I said Barca were lacking soldiers, and Lewandowski is one of those soldiers. And for the Clásico, you need that bite, and we didn't have that. Madrid have that in abundance, both physically and mentally, if you will. I don't know. I know it's so dumb for me. I claim to be this tactical analyst, but it felt like they had that bite. They wanted it more. It's such a cliche to say, but Madrid they did want it a bit more than Barca, and Barca were a bit subdued in their approach and their intent in the ball playing and pressing, everything, right? And the pressing is obviously the physical part is there. But it's also the coordination, it's also the reading the triggers and all that stuff. And Barca they were just not in it, right? The pressing often feels so individualistic. I will press here, you will press there. Maybe I'll go now, maybe I'll go a couple seconds later. It just doesn't work that way. And to your point, yes, having a Lewandowski, having a Rafinha in there, having a Gavi in there, it changes the whole picture, right? Because these players, they're just not going to roll over and let Madrid do whatever they want to do. I'm not saying that this is what the current Barca do, but we are a bit too nice, especially for facing Real Madrid, who are the opposite of that. They're just not nice at all. But it works. It works for them, and they have managed to beat us. So credit to them. Obviously, it was also a tactical battle lost. I'm not saying that there was no tactics involved. Obviously, Xabi Alonso did a good job at doing what he had to be done. But a lot of this loss is just beyond the tactics, I feel like. And yes, you can say, okay, we were missing players, and when we are fully fit, Barca are equipped with soldiers, so to speak, to combat this Madrid side. But at the moment, this depleted squad was just not it. So I think we do have that excuse, but also at the same time, even this Barca team that was so depleted, that is still so depleted, we could have managed a draw. We could have gotten at least 1 point from that game. And I know Jules Koundé missed that sitter, but to his credit, I think it was a lot more difficult of a chance than we think it is, because he was in motion. He had to control the ball on his chest perfectly, or just maybe do a diving header or whatnot to make that count. So I don't think it was that easy of a chance. But the point still stands, right? Even this depleted Barca could have taken a point from this game, and that kind of speaks volumes to me, because and I said this after the game as well. Last season, Barca probably would crush this Madrid side because they're not flawless. They're far from flawless, and they're making it out to be they're making this win out to be this amazing thing that has happened, right? This glorious win over I don't know over their rivals, which it is. It's a win over Barca, so it counts. But at the same time, I don't see it that way. I don't see it as this magnificent achievement they've done. So I think there's that in this conversation then.
Well, I do want to leave a little meat on the bone, because I can remind people to subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow on the podcast apps, because Carlos Reixac, former Barcelona, I'd say on the verge of legend, but in terms of the history of the club, he suggested moving to a 4-4-2 setup with 4 midfielders in a diamond formation. And again, I feel like that would send us into hour 2. Which again, I want to leave some meat on the bone. So again, I'm gonna tell people to subscribe to my YouTube channel, join me on the Big Up on the chat and the watch along there for these matches, because again, that's the kind of place we can have even more dialogue and conversation about these kind of things. Because for now, I think Domagoy, I've used up all the time I can from you. I would like to know, as I always do, what do you have cooking up there on over there, I should say, on Barca football?
We're trying to change our whole YouTube setup a little bit as well. We love what we do. Obviously, we wouldn't be doing it otherwise. But getting those views up, getting the subscribers going, it's tough. It's a tough game. You know this, Dan, as well. So we've introduced the board into our videos. We're trying to recreate situations, do a what if scenarios, do actual educational stuff with the board, so a physical board, and trying to address some of the weaknesses Barca have, but also adding this whole educational, just general football aspect into it. So we're trying that. So do make sure to check it out and see if you like any of it, guys. If you don't, that's fine. On the blog, it's business as usual, but we are making big changes to the blog as well. We'll be creating some new tiers of subscription. We'll be publishing some new stuff, exciting stuff. But yes, the tactical analysis is still going strong there, and we're doing a weekly thing now as well. So we're doing our best. It's a slog, it's not easy, but we do think that we have quality content. It's just about getting it out there and promoting it a little bit more, and maybe making it look a bit better, because our videos, to be fair, we've never really paid a lot of attention to editing and making it look flashy and whatnot. We usually let the quality of the analysis speak for itself. So we'll be looking to address some of those things. But yes, always a pleasure to be here, Dan. I am a big fan of what you do. I think you deserve all the views and more and more. So I would say that big thumbs up to you as well.
Well, yeah, thank you, Domagoy. Thank you to the audience as well. Again, remember, if you're still here, though, of course you do support independent media. Again, if people actually understood how low the money and numbers are behind the scenes, they would understand that so much of what we do is a labor of love, because again, we enjoy talking to people and growing this Barca community. Again, not just in the pursuit of FC Barcelona and this club that we love, but also in this pursuit, to your point, about the ideas and the game. And one of the things I think you and I both latched onto with this club that we love so much is that it winds up very much, yes, it came from the ideas of Johan Cruyff, and before him, even Rinus Michels. Like, Barcelona has always felt like it was, and I'll go back even to the late 50s and 60s before he did, he went to Inter Milan, but in Eleno Herrera, Barcelona has always felt like, as a club and as a football institution, even with the Femení, it is seemingly always at the forefront of this sport that we love so much. And that means that there's always, with this club, things to think about and talk about. And it feels like by talking about Barcelona, you're on the precipice of what's coming next in world football. And that is one of the things I've always loved about this club. And again, that's why I tell people, yes, support independent media, because it may not be the big TV shows and the big publications that come up with the thing that's coming next. It might be either, a squirrel can find a nut sometimes. I'm not saying that you and I are squirrels, but sometimes that, we might be onto something that we don't understand what we have. And that's why, again, being a part of these communities where you have a voice, that's why I say, please join me on Big Up on Sunday for that match against Elche, where we're going to have some fun. We're going to chat. We're going to talk it over. And I also want to say, for those, again, who are still here, that I've got some big announcements. I know I always say this, but truly I do. I actually have something that I wanted to have out by the time El Clásico came, but for full transparency, the store is getting not a rebrand. We're still the Barcelona podcast, but the store is getting a redo. I'm now using a different company to do as a supplier, so that means prices are coming down. That means the shipping prices that were previously way too high, and I totally understood that. I've revised that. So now merch is going to be much, much cheaper across the board. And that is going to be dropping this week. So look out for the announcement there. I'll be putting it all over whatever it is when I fully announce that. And I also have something that I'm going to be giving away soon that I wanted to again do for El Clásico. Did not have time. But yeah, it is some exciting stuff. And I especially want to thank everybody to Domagoj's point about views and subscriptions on the YouTube channel. I've been calling for people, and we zoomed past 50,000. We're now at 65,000 by the time this hits your eyes. So I'm so excited about the growth that I've been able to have recently. And so thank you, everybody. I could continue to go on and on and on. But for Domagoj and I, we say, as always, Forza Barca.